So you want to learn Docker, or maybe you don't need to learn Docker, but you need a testing environment. In this video, you will learn how to set up an environment for running Docker containers on your Windows or Mac. Just go to this website that you see on your screen and install the version that you need. This will give you the ability to run any Docker container locally. Once you have it set up, you don't even need internet access. And once you run the installation after you download it, it will place the icon on your desktop. Once you click on it, you will not really see anything, but you'll get notifications. Docker Desktop is something that kind of runs on the background, and you will be notified once it's ready to go, and you just open up your PowerShell and you will get the notifications that it will have started. And once it does, we open up our PowerShell window and we can run a couple commands, and I will show you a command now. It's very simple. Once you have containers running, you run a Docker PS command and you could see the Docker containers you have, and you will notice they have a name. If you look at the second column, the image, WordPress latest and MySQL 5.7. Two of those because I have two Docker WordPress containers running and their respective MySQL databases. And now we could look at this file that I used to create this. We will use this one to follow along. And you could see the version just means the latest Docker Compose version. The services refer to the containers that we will create. Here are two, the database and the WordPress. You see the image, you see the volumes I've created, and these volumes are for data to persist because Docker containers by default delete the data every time you restart. So you create a volume in order for it to persist. And then you put your environment variables. You always need a MySQL root password, you need a database, you need a user and a user password, and that's there. Then you have your WordPress information. And WordPress depends on that database, and that's why we specify depends on and a DB. And you see that WordPress will use the latest WordPress image, but you could put anything here. You could put 5.4, WordPress : and you want an Alpine version. And again, we specify the WordPress volume so that it stores the data, and also the port information so that it knows how to access, and of course the database password, username, etc. All this is needed, and I will put it in the description down below so that you can have this complete file. And the only thing you have to be careful about is to make sure that you are using spaces, not tabs, but spaces, because this is a YAML file. And here is a complete WordPress site running on my local host using port 9999. And the file that I use for this points 9999 to port 80. And that's how those ports work. And as you could see, this is a complete WordPress site running locally on my machine. I don't need internet access to run this. And another nice feature about Docker Desktop is that it also has a user interface. And this will show you which containers you have running. So you click on the taskbar and then you click on the icon and go to the dashboard. And once it opens up the dashboard, you will see the containers that you have running. As you saw earlier, I have 4. But what this does, it places the project, if you will, and it shows you the containers within that project. So I have 2 for each WordPress website, and this is the example that I created for you. And when you click on this icon, it opens up the browser for you. And you see, once again, localhost : 9999. Same one I showed earlier. And once again, it's a complete WordPress site. I haven't modified it, it's just a theme. But here you can also stop that container or that project. So it will stop the MySQL database container and the WordPress container. So now that has stopped. And when we go back into the PowerShell, we will be able to start now the Docker Compose file that we started earlier. And here I am showing you, I catted the file, and you could see it's exactly the same one that I created earlier in Notepad++. Same information, everything. And the command that we use is Docker Compose or Docker-Compose, and you specify up. And what up does, it brings up that container. Both of them. Any container that you specify in the Docker Compose file brings it up. And if you don't specify anything else after Docker Compose up, it will just continue running in the foreground there. So if you try to type anything, it will not work because it's running in your window in the foreground. But I will show you that there's an actual way on how to run the Docker Compose file. But what I have found with this is that it helps you to see any error messages that pop up. And at first you do get a couple error messages, and that's just while it's booting up. But as you could see, now it's running, but my WordPress example file on top is not running. You see the database, you see the WordPress container. We click on to open in the browser, and you see it now, it's localhost 8888, and here is your WordPress admin installation. And you could just go through the installation as you would any WordPress site. Now this is a very, very useful process. I love it. If you've ever tried to spin up a WordPress site on your own, in your own virtual environment in GCP or AWS, it's not as easy as, it's way faster than building your own server at home or in the office. And now if I come into my website, now that I have logged in, you'll see localhost 8888, and I'm in my WordPress admin site. And just like any other WordPress, I can come in here and delete themes that I don't want. Okay, we delete these two. But at the same time, I can come in here and add a new theme, right? You come in here, I can install it, and I can activate it. And at the same time, if I want to install the starter templates, I could do that as well. I can install the Elementor for configuring and creating posts and pages. I can look for the starter templates that are available here. And the one that I use on the example website when we started this video, it's in here, and it's a barber shop, right? So there you go, it's right here. I could import the complete site with the pictures, images, everything. And you could see I am still on my local host 8888. And it will import everything that I will need. And it takes a couple minutes. And it's rather fast, but it's a lot of information that it's importing. And you will also see here that you have your Docker running here. One other interesting thing that I can mention while we wait for it to import site is that you can come to the second button here, and this is your CLI. Basically, you're going inside the container and you can do configuration. Here is, remember in the volume we specified that this would be the volume that we wanted to use for WordPress. And you could see all of your WordPress files here. And we can close that out. And when we come back, we see that it was imported successfully. Click here, and the page looks exactly as it did for my example that I showed you. Now, how easy is that? And now that we have our site up and running, if you recall, I mentioned that if we are running Docker with just docker-compose up, that the file would continue running, or the Docker containers would continue running in the foreground. So I can't run any commands. I could, hit the enter key and type. I can't. The only thing I could do right here is I could do a Control-C. And what's going to happen, it's starting to stop, and it's doing it gracefully so you don't experience any corruption. It stops the Docker tutorial WordPress site, or container, I should say. And it also stops the database, which is called Docker tutorial DB1. Now, if I return here and I refresh, you will see that it's just timing out. And that's it. Cannot find anything, because we have effectively shut down that container. But I could just as easily come back, Docker compose up, and it spins up my containers. Refresh. And there we go, once again. And the customizations that we did are still here. The themes that we did, it's all here. It didn't go away. And why is that? Well, if we recall, I'm going to hit C again here and stop these containers. If you recall that we actually catted the file, the Docker compose, that YAML file, and we see that here are the volumes, and these volumes persist with each restart. You could reboot your entire workstation and bring up Docker desktop, bring up this container, and it will continue to have all the changes that you've made. It will have all the files that you add, the images, and nothing will disappear. And like I mentioned, this is good for testing, because before you spin up a GCP instance or an AWS instance, just do it here. And you could run all your testing locally. Obviously, once you go into production, you will have to do other tests. But with this, you could be anywhere. You could be on the plane running these tests, as long as you've downloaded everything that you need, and then you could customize all you want. Now, if we wanted to run this and have it run permanently, because you can run a Docker container inside of a GCP instance or an AWS EC2. You could run it inside and have it be your production environment. The way we would run this is we would do a Docker compose up, and you do a -D. And now this will run in the background, and you have access to your command line. I can up arrow, and so I'm back inside my command line. And if I come back over here and I refresh, my site is still there. And now I could do all sorts of things. I could continue working on this. If this was a true GCP image, that's it. We would be done. You could continue to run this, and it would survive a reboot. It would restart automatically your Docker container. Now, let's say that you wanted to create another container. Just like this, you want another WordPress site, or you have another customer that you're building their website. So it's not going to look just like this. It won't have this theme, but you just want to start another WordPress container on your local machine. This is where I really enjoy this, because it is so fast. I want to show you. So let's go back to our PowerShell. And the speed in which we could do this, it just depends on how fast you could type. It's only a few words, but sometimes we make mistakes. So let me go back one, and let's say I want to copy this Docker tutorial, and I want to call it new tutorial. Okay, I'm copying that folder over there. Now I go to new tutorial, and I have a Docker compose file in there, and it's the same one. All I have to do is docker-compose up, and we will get an error message. I want you to see this. And you see it's already creating the volumes, and there is what happened. We got an error message. Remember, we can only use the same port once, and we are already using 888. But that's not a problem. So don't penalize me for this time. I could do a notepad, Docker compose, and I can come down here, and I will change this to 8800. Let's see. I think I'm not using 8800. And we save it. Close it out. Up arrow, Docker compose up. Well, we get an error message now. Well, it looks like it's working. It's quite fast. Let's go to our Docker and see. We see Docker tutorials running right here, and we see our new tutorial running right here. So our first one is still running. And we could actually come in here, and let's click on new tutorial and click on this. And there we go. You have a brand new installation, both running on the same computer, 8888 and 8800. And you can go through the process of configuring your site title username for the new customer. And customer, let's call them 8888, wants some changes, you change it here, done. 8800, you change it here, done. And they all have their own containers. So I can Control C out of here, and it will bring down that container. So if I come back over here, it will be gone. Okay, because I shut it down. I do a Docker PS, and once again you see the 4. Now what if I do the Docker compose the right way, up -D, and now it will bring up these containers, and I will have my command line, and I can do a docker-compose, Docker PS. And now you see that we have 6 containers. We have WordPress, MySQL, they correspond to each other, WordPress, MySQL, WordPress, and MySQL. We have 6 containers running locally. And if you look at the ports, you will see 8800 goes to 80, 8888 goes to 80, and 8000 goes to 80. It's all the different containers that we have here. And I can come back here, and I could do a Docker down. I'm sorry, Docker compose down, and it will bring down that container.